To wrap up this morning's presentation, I would like to invite back Mr. Darren, President of ICOMIA, for his overview on the regional roundup.
Thank you, Vicky. I need my glasses for this one because I'm going to try and grab some of the quick notes that I took during those fantastic presentations. I guess if we start with Thailand and we sort of, I guess, look at the presentation that Dittapong did and the areas and with Scott and the cruising areas, I think that just reinforces how wonderful some of these opportunities are in this region to be able to get out into some of these incredible places. I can actually talk from a little bit of experience insofar as that in February this year I was actually doing exactly that around the PPs and the Andaman Seas. So I think the thing that's interesting and what really came across strongly to me is actually the maturity in these markets and in these countries. What people have demonstrated is, you know, the infrastructure that is in place with the marinas, the boatyards and the shipyards, and the opportunities that exist for those to respond to the growth in the market is there. That the approach to the industry more broadly in terms of its collaboration, either in country or between countries, and the promotion of events, both for boaters to attract various things, whether it be the grow boating events that are happening in different places, whether it's the boat shows that are happening in different places, or whether it's some of the yachting passages that are being structured and organised to try and make these things happen. So one of the things that struck me in particular was when Scott talked about the initiative to do that, the beach cleanup. And that in itself is a fantastic example of where the industry can raise its profile and its credibility by taking on that sort of responsibility to say, we recognise that there's a problem, it's not necessarily caused by us, but we're going to step up and we're going to work to solve this. And it's all about, if we look at the big picture here, and the gentleman at the back raised a very valid point, it's all about you know, the challenges that exist with the paperwork, the bureaucracy, and the complexities associated with being able to be able to move between countries and within countries and the things that you can do. But ultimately, the ability to be able to change that comes from a platform, and that platform needs to be a platform of strength of what this industry can add to its local communities, what it can do in terms of its local environment and what it can do in relation to boating safety and other engagement issues. So I sort of take a lot of confidence from the presentations that have occurred, and particularly just the starting ones from Dittapong and Scott. I think they really just reinforced and provided that foundation. As we moved into Malaysia with Sazli and Alvin, I think there was a couple of things that really jumped out at me there. One was to the Sail Malaysia statistics about how 20% of the yachts were coming from North America and 30% from the EU, and the reinforcement of the point that these were vessels that made a decision to effectively do a circumnavigation. And really, at the end of the day, I guess, you know, what's the objective here? The objective is to make this area attractive, accessible and easy for crews and their customers to be able to come here and enjoy easy passage around this wonderful, wonderful area. In fact, Ruud's map that he put up of the region, you know, showing you know, all of the opportunities are, and a very quick assessment of the world map sees its scale in context of the Mediterranean or the Caribbean, and you can see there's such an enormous capacity for fantastic cruising within this location that needs to have a strategy around how you actually make it easy for people to do it. How do you attract skippers and ultimately owners, but how do you make the captain of a super yacht that typically plies the trade between the Caribbean and the Med to go, no, we're going to Southeast Asia and we're going to have the boat based out there for a number of years? And that's the fundamental question that we have to answer. And I think when you look at it and you go, you know, regulation is regulation. You know, immigration, customs, we're not going to change that anytime soon. They are specific regulations associated with how you enter sovereign territories. But I don't think that in itself is necessarily problematic insofar as that can be procedural and agents can deal with that, and there can be a system to ensure that occurs. I think in the short term, in looking at the variances of the rules, crew can only be 30 days here, or there's no limit to a yacht in Malaysia, or there's a limit to yacht times in Thailand that are different from different areas and things like that. I think, you know, it almost creates a somewhat perverse passage plan insofar as you go, well, I'm allowed to stay there for that distance, but I'm going to buy my fuel over there because it's more cost effective, but then I can get my repairs done there and I can move around. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because what happens is that as the market matures and the tourism drivers that come from those vessels all of a sudden start having significant effect to the local economies, that governments around the whole region will look at it and say, we want a piece of that pie. And that's the point at which we want governments to say the employment it generates, the tourism it draws, all of those elements are the things that you want each country's government to look at and embrace and say, this is an important industry for us, we want to support it. I thought it was interesting to see Alvin's comment about the Langkawi flag and how there's some more rules coming out around that. I think that in itself creates great opportunities within the region. And then when we got to Prakash and looking at Indonesia, again, I guess the 3 years capability, the challenge there, of course, is the no commercial charter. And I think in some respects, that again forms a business case style approach to saying, look, there's, you know, this is something that wants to be supported because of the tourism opportunities that flow from it and all of those sorts of outcomes. And I think this is where there's a great opportunity for the members of ICOMIA to come together and share a lot of the work that's already been done. This isn't new. You know, this work about the benefit of the super yacht sector or the benefit of refit or the benefit of boating more generally, there are enormous studies that have been done all over the world. The principles are the same. It's just a different geography and it's the same agenda. It's the same table of contents. It's just the data that goes into it needs to be updated and reflective of your particular regions. And interesting with Kent's commentary on Singapore and the opportunity for Singapore to provide that technical stopover and access point for yachts, and particularly, I guess, noting the collective supply chain issues that we've all had in terms of trying to keep vessels going and particularly in the refit sector. And I guess when we got to when Ruud took us through sort of the rest of Southeast Asia, and particularly looking along the coast of Vietnam, I had to smile to myself actually when he showed the island of Phu Quoc with some marinas potentially down there. My business partner Andrew and I were down in Phu Quoc on business in the mid-90s. It was a somewhat different place than it is today, I'm sure, but it was an incredibly beautiful part of the world. But I guess there was a couple of comments there that really struck a chord with me. One was that infrastructure, marinas, are a point of connectivity, but in essence they're a catalyst. Infrastructure is a catalyst. And one of the constraints to most often being able to build this type of infrastructure is having commercial terms with government landlords, given that the waterways fundamentally in most countries government land, so you end up with seabed lease. Having terms over those seabeds that actually make sense for the investment and maintenance of marinas is fundamentally important. And again, this is, I think, where ICOMIA, through its International Marinas Group, has developed some pretty significant policy positions on that provide outlines to it. We actually have government policies written in different countries, including Australia, that actually provide clear guidance as to how that works, how you can create a relationship between industry and government on seabeds to actually build maritime infrastructure. And that's where I think the sharing of that information provides great precedence for being able to flow that out into different parts of the world. And I guess the other thing that really struck me was that I just looked at that map that Ruud put up, and he went, this area has such an enormous potential, but also such an enormous potential for capacity. And if you look at some of the biggest challenges, you know, Europe and around the Med, you know, it's all boats crammed into extraordinarily expensive marinas, jostling for positions, and it's very difficult to get a berth. Whereas here, you can go to places and anchorages that are in isolation, you can go to great marinas, and there is obviously the developing of an enormous number of facilities around the region that will support it. Now, obviously, to get European and you know, American ships or super yachts away from their home ports, there needs to be the confidence in the infrastructure here so that they can do the refits and repairs, so that they can actually be in the region for a number of years at a time. And I think when it all comes down to actually how we take that forward, it's fundamentally, you know, about developing a strategy. And that strategy is, you know, there is already published information about what the various rules of access and into and out to and all those sorts of things, but how do we build that into a broader strategy so that it's easy for people to understand that here is a whole series of passage plans, this is how you do it. You know, so that information can be translated through, and then at any one point through your passage plan, here's your points of access and the capacities of all the infrastructure that exists around the region. That means that if you do have a problem, you're only that far from a marina that's got a travel lift that can lift your 40-metre super yacht. You know, so it's that sort of information that actually already exists. The people in this room probably know it already, and so I think that's where the opportunity is for us to actually come together as a group and say, right, let's all put this together, let's get this onto the world stage, and let's promote the opportunity that it presents more broadly. So, look, in sort of final summary, I guess, in listening to all of those presentations, I was actually quite surprised as to how much infrastructure there already is and how much opportunity there is, because recognising that there still needs to be an increase in capacity and style and refit to deal with the nature of the yachts that we're trying to attract to the region. But even within the rules, differences but similarities. Professional agents can take a pathway through all of those type of things. The key is just designing it in a way that makes it as simple and clear to external people that don't understand the region. And I think there's a huge opportunity for that. So I was very pleased to be able to get further understanding from that. Thank you.